Greetings and salutations. So, I am going to talk a little bit about the construction of the book, and here we are. Badoom. We're going to be reading the specific designation we're reading from is page 220, Ideation, Capturing Inspiration. So, one of the things that's a bit meta about this book is that the creation of this book is also what the book is written about. And if you have the book, you will certainly you'll certainly see the expansiveness and the scope of it, and it would not be an uncommon reaction to wonder, how is something as complex as this cohesive? And the book is actually about how you can create things that are beyond your capacity. So press pause on that. We'll get to that in chapter 12. But there are 13 chapters in this book. So I want to, and we will get to, this actually goes full circle to what we're going to read about today. But there are 13 chapters and there are 3 parts. And the first part of the book has 3 chapters. The second part of the book has 7 chapters. And the final part of the book has 3 chapters as well. Now, part 1 is actually an overlay to the 3 parts of the book. So chapter 1 is part 1. So it's an introduction to the ethos of Parinama method. It's a relatively short chapter. It really is like an overview, and in many ways it's Parinama for beginners. It's like kind of the overlay for something that's actually not in the book, but still, it's still serviceable. Chapter 2 is an overlay for part 2. So in chapter 2, what you get is an explanation, if you look at it, at how part 2 actually is structured and how it works. And also, in essence, you're getting the initial development, like summaries of actually everything all put together. And then in chapter 3, what you're getting is actually, and this is one of the things I think part 3, and the reason I'm pointing to this is that we're going to talk about parallax a little bit, and there's a chance I may go back and read some of the sections out of part 3, specifically the page is, if you're following along, we've got some really important themes in here. I wish I could actually read the whole thing, because it's page 43, where we get into parallax, paradoxes, complementary opposites, ambiguity and continuum versus polarity, cycles, so ebbs and flows, highs and lows, predictably unpredictable, directionality, 2 directions moving through the hubs, which we get to in part 3, the phases of life. And then there's also trust yourself, curiosity, and the myth of permanent happiness, changes in relationships with others, and really importantly, inside job in your own experience. Inside job in your own experience, I would say, on page 49 and 50 are really key. So to go back to it, part 3, it may seem, if you're reading the book chronologically, part 3 may kind of feel like it comes out of nowhere a little bit, because it's addressing things like, I think the title of the chapter is like Into the Void, right? Entering the void, paradox, ambiguity, and nuance. And do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes, is the header there. And so it's kind of like it has this quality to it where, in part, and that's kind of expands into notions that are like thematic in a sense, but ultimately are what, but seem misplaced because you could read part 1, you could read chapter 1, chapter 2, and it would seem very natural to go into part 2 because chapter 2 is kind of like a sort of orientation guide or sort of an introduction for all the part 2's chapters. But chapter 3 is actually kind of like speaks to something that is qualitative of this book, which is that it completes a full circle. And very much like a nautilus, which was alluded to yesterday in the reading, there's a quality of this book which is, and by book I'm calling it just like, but that like this methodology and how it's represented in this book, that it has a unfurling infinity to it. So part 3 winds up, actually you'll start to see that come back in as we are steering into the 6th and the 7th hub. And then in chapter 13, it's like where you get kind of the loop on this. But an important thing, so people who have completed the book, people who wonder like what would come next after the book, there were some people early on that read the book like relatively quickly, like in 4 months, which is very fast for this book. And they came to me and asked, well, what do I do next? And and my honest answer is read it again. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why I'm getting this, like, squeaky thing, but there you have it. So, the thing, and this is actually something, I'm the author of this book, and I'm doing this, and I'm having, like, a processing and expansion through, my exposure to it. So, I think one of the things that in some ways I think when you're in the book reading it, and especially if you're not hearing me reading it, is that I'm not a character in this. Like I show up in it. I'm there's just the natural bias of like the sort of like my sort of involvement in it. But when you're reading the book and you're doing it yourself, the contemplation and what is surfaced, what's accessed and activated is uniquely yours. So to that point, it's like, what do you get out of Parinama method? Well, the intentional vagueness of this is that it's something very unique to you. And the unfurling of this is like, it's as infinite as you want it to be. I mean, that's the thing. It's as infinite as you want it to be. So this process is, and this is where we get into like curiosity, is that, this notion of like self-help and like doing work and healing and, this really becomes like, like that, what you start to be able, like initially the first cycles, s- like what they're doing is they actually start to, they're kind of like their purpose is they slough off like trauma, like physical world trauma. And then the more we're cycling into this, like the infinity of this, is that in the nautilus shell analogy, is that there's increasing access to facets and aspects of yourself that that are both simultaneously extraordinarily familiar because they're like at the absolute core of who you are, and also kind of extraordinary and astonishing and surprising, like because they burn so brightly. And so this process is, um it's as ongoing as you want it to be. And so the caveat to that is that to the point that this is your individual process, is that the things that will come to you in this, if you are doing this with with inquiry and curiosity and openness and receptivity, is that there's just going to be poems and artwork and conversations and podcasts and chance encounters, and like the synchronicity is going to start to really move in to support this process. It's very much like the saying they say, it's like, if you ask for the teacher and the teacher arrives, is that I see it more as like a fabric with a lot of, different inputs, where it's like nature and people and art and, just it's just a very like multivariable, multifaceted, um oh, that's great. Oh, I do love getting Parinama people messages, by the way, and seeing what people are doing. It's really wonderful. And actually that speaks to something here, is that if the receptivity and the openness to this and the ongoing quality that this has, it's very individual. And one of the things is that, folks, in terms of like, folks will often project on me. Like it's actually a way of it's like a safety. The way I see it is there's kind of like a safety mechanism, and I talk about this earlier in the book, of how you can access these notions is kind of from a distance, and like this would be good for other people. And and that's kind of it's and like, go, oh, it's a projection, and it is. But back to this thing, like, we don't do this thing where it's like, "Oh, I'm doing this stupid thing." You're not doing a stupid thing. It's even the thing about, like, seeing something from a distance and considering it conceptually as, like, a way to begin to be able to be comfortable with it in the room with you. Like, you see this, one of the things that you if you pay attention, like, if you watch, you see, like shows that show people who are like dealing with traumatic events, they'll often talk in like the third person about it. Like, well, people tend to blah blah blah. Like, they won't say, the way this felt was really like terrible and distressing. They'll say, well, when this happens to people, they tend to get very distressed. And like, this is one of the things where you're like letting it through gates into like actually like the true vulnerability of it. So I point to this, just, that I don't mind. Like, people will send me stuff and give me advice about what I could be doing and stuff. And I really don't mind, but I know what it is. Like, it's not for me. I know it's like that's it, it's just still distancing, but it's like, consider it kind of like going through like the locks of the canal, like where you're kind of slowly getting comfortable with notions that could be for you and could be trusted in your intimacy. So I don't really mind holding that space. So go for it. Share stuff with me. And also, I love it. I actually, the messages sometimes, the messages that come in throughout the day, um, I'm really lucky that people like to share with me the things that are happening, the parinamers, whatever. I don't want, yeah, like just the whatever TPM people who are doing it, and just the variety of what is possible. Because this is like really like what you're doing is you're going into the like source code. So everything that emanates out of that is fair game for what can be impacted by it. So we can be talking about career. We can be talking about relationship. Like right now, like some of the key folks that are sort of in my view, because it's sort of, ebbs and flows. People are kind of, like come in and come out. It's a natural part of a process like this, especially with how long term it ultimately is that, we're talking about people whose like relationships are leveling up in like major ways. Talking about people who are having business wins in major ways. We're having people that are like having really like personal things in terms of their like journey with their like mental health, and like in major ways having people that are like finding more like like ability and capability to like actually stand up for themselves. Like there's just in like the in really disparate ways, and they're uniquely yours, but they're also really united in the fact that, you know, ultimately this is something that has this universality to it. The fact that this can be a methodology that applies to any human that is like kind of called to work with it. And so as a result of that, it's kind of has this like special thing, and it has the quality where where you have something that is both extraordinarily unique to you, but also a very strong united experience. And one more thing I want to say before I read, because this, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I talked about that. Actually, that felt really full kite. It was full kite. Like where the kite kind of like really hits the wind. That was good. There's an idea. So one of the things I want to point to also with this is that it's the consumer model is infiltrated absolutely every framework that we operate in. And so one of the things about consumerism is that I get people who are concerned or like wish more people, you know, all this kind of stuff with this. And I'm telling you right now, all that matters is that you are doing this. I'm not going to explain this anymore, but you need to know other people. All that matters, you, you, all that matters. Yeah. There's more than meets the eye with this. Like as far, and there's like using that model that like things are validated by volume. They're not. Please trust me just for right now on this one. Please trust me on this one, that your process is all that needs to matter. That's it. Your process in earnest with this, your process in this discovery, this expansion, this exploit, like this ascension, what you experience in this is all that matters. Look, I mean, I don't know, like one kind of like sort of like shitty sort of put this is how many organizations that have you been in that have like high-minded ideals and have a lot of people in them, and like the majority of people just aren't on it. So what, you know, all that matters, because the thing is you're breaking through, you're shining, your ascension is the hero that you've been waiting for. You're the hero you've been waiting for. The change, the impact in the world, the voice that you've been waiting to hear is yours. It's coming through you. So it's all that matters. It's all that matters is that that this is coming through you, and that you're like, I mean, yeah. So I'm going to leave it at that. Should we put this up right here? I wonder if this would show. Oh, no, it's not high enough. Put this on a little platform. It might be kind of funny. No, it's still not high enough. It needs to be pretty high. All right, maybe next time. I like the idea of a little gong in the corner. What? Oh, now I'm like really attached to it. It's too much like engineering for me to be able to like. figure out, but I love this little thing. These actually, I have like I bought them for my birthday in when I started like in earnest full-time writing the book, because I've been trying to do other stuff at the same time and it was kind of like too much. And I bought those, the color coded to the chakras allegedly. And they're cute. They cute. Yeah. All right. So we're going to do it. We're going to get into it. Ideation, ideation, ideation. Ideation, what does it mean? What do you think it means? When you think of ideation, when you think of intuition versus ideation, contemplate the difference between those. So I'm not going to tell you what I think. You can ask in the comments if you want to know. All right. So we don't know where ideas come from or how to predict them, but we can actively cultivate space for ideas and inspiration. We've actually talked about that. In On Writing, a Memoir of the Craft, Stephen King states that ideas for stories come, quote, sailing at you right out of the empty sky. Two previously unrelated ideas come together and make something new under the sun. Your job isn't to find these ideas, but to recognize them when they show up. Ideas can land in our minds as images and feelings, and sometimes as a tangle of words or sound that require combing and coaxing. The larger our database of experience, the greater the scope of our potential for creativity, traveling, meeting new people. That's you, Mira. Love you. I love you. Mira, wow. You know, I'm actually going to talk about Mira right now. I'm going to say that I met Mira practicing yoga in India, and I felt like I had met a star. I had met a star. Just one of the most interesting people. And if I'd like write a poem to this, like the feeling, because it was so special. I really felt I'd really met, like part of the thing, I met somebody who expanded my consciousness and represented a way of being that was courageous in this, just like, I mean, like people use the term rock star, like this is tiers above that. And I don't want to it's almost like I don't want to tell the stories because like, I mean, I was just so, and it wasn't like childish gaga thing. It was just like very like this kind of adult level of awe, which is such an awe, it's like usually when you're thinking of, it was like there's a teacher dynamic, but it was this kind of really out of this like very like recognizing. And I remember recognizing parts of myself that had been like dormant and coded and adapted that were kind of like woken up. I remember thinking like I used to have that kind of courage. That used to be the stuff that was like very activating. Like that I could yeah. Just a really important person for the world. A voice, a message, an expression, a creation. So it's just, that's my short, very and short and coming up short love letter, spoken word love letter. It's deeper than that, my feeling about this. One thing I'll say is that in Ashtanga, my personal experience in the practice was so different than so I didn't it didn't matter that the people around me didn't seem to really be tapping into what I felt was possible in it. And I really felt that or I knew, I saw, I experienced, I understood that Mira was operating at this tactile, deeper level, and calling. So that was there was a coming homeness to that. There was a very recognized feeling. So, okay. So here we are. So potential for creativity, traveling, meeting new people, seeing new things, working, attending cultural events, taking different routes than the ones we typically take, and any other new experiences all show us a larger world outside the one we typically inhabit. So creation is a mystical mashup of different things coming together to form new ones. It's almost like the atoms, like we're creating molecules. It's the creation of molecules, new compounds, new arrangements, And once we start to see or envision something, it begins the process of becoming possible for us. When we're curious and open, we look to expose ourselves to new ideas and people as often as possible. I mean, even this book is a great example of this. On a single page, you think of the absolute contribution of, you have even on this page, you've got Scientific American, Jackson Pollock, Stephen King, you have Da Vinci, Einstein, Saul Bellow, science. I mean, it's a compound. It's atoms coming together to form a new configuration. Yeah, it's really great. So most people can recall having an idea, not acting on it, and then seeing it come to life through someone else. Ideation is fickle, lighthearted, and behaves like a mirthful wood sprite that wakes you up at 3 a.m. to play and then hides when daylight comes. Ideas flirt, seduce, and evade in their game of hide and seek. This muse of creativity waits to be found. And if you give up the search, it looks for someone else who wants to play. Yeah, there's a lot. I feel like I have the sense that it's talking more on that might be a little, there's a lot more in that. Yeah, that could be, that one paragraph could actually be a weekend workshop. But anyway, we'll keep going. So as adults, we can be out of practice and inclined to crowd out the liminal open space, the receptivity and time needed to allow for new ideas. Inspiration tends to strike when we clear our minds and ask a question. In almost every example of a culture, changing dream, the dreamer spent waking hours asking a question that a dream answered. The conscious mind works in concert with this process. The delta brainwaves of deep, dreamless sleep are experienced in the first sleepy moments of the morning. before you shift into the brief period of theta wavelengths that support the ideal state for ideation. Theta waves are between the alpha, beta, and gamma waves of different states of wakefulness. The theta wave state is when you have one foot in awakened consciousness and the other in the subconscious. It happens when you're waking up, falling asleep, relaxed, or sleepy, preparing for this brief, potent transition between being awake and in deep sleep increases your chances of capturing inspiration. This is when our brain delivers ideas from the subconscious and perhaps the great beyond. And knowing this is important for being able to take full advantage of it. Okay, so according to Sal Bello, you never have to change anything you got up in the middle of the night to write. Da Vinci and Einstein maintained extensive journals throughout their lives. The experience of everyday life inspired them to fill their diaries with imagination, dreams, musings, and questions. The range of questions was absurd and fascinating. Da Vinci and Einstein's 21st century biographer, Walter Isaacson, used these journals for his research and noted that both men had asked the same question: why is the sky blue? The ability to use the states of our brain to take... Actually, I'm going to stop for a second. The reason I put that in is I think there's a tendency to believe that you have to have smart questions. Like when you're at when you're in class, you used to be in class, or you go to a event where people can audience members can ask questions, and there's this quality of a question which is like sort of an attempt as an exposition to sort of be like view my intelligence like that, and there's a quality, and it's revolting. Like everyone's like, oof, like it's really... And it's kind of like, well, why does that have that quality? The quality of a question that doesn't really care about the answer. And there's something extraordinary. And one of the things is this is pointing to something is like questions. And when you hear them, you can sense the quality, this particular quality of the question being in the integrity of being a question, not being a manipulation, not being leading, not being an attempt to appear like smart and, was it cunning and, brilliant and all this types of insight, where you're getting out of the fucking way and you're asking the question that you want to know, and you're willing to surrender all of your adaptations in the service of finding this answer. Like, this is part of why we ascend here, is that like we're really trying to get as clean as possible in the questions we're asking. Like, there isn't shame and I'm not smart, or this is like, why is the sky blue? It's like, that's so dumb. I should know that. I don't know why the sky, something like the water reflects on the sky or something. I don't know. And honestly, I don't care why. If I did, I'd Google it. It's like that easy. I don't know the answer. I don't know why the sky is blue. I don't know why the sky's blue. I don't know why water's blue. I mean, like, it doesn't matter. Like, the thing about being like, my questions need to be intelligent. Your questions need to be your questions. And part of this is really tapping in to your ability and willingness to sense this about yourself. Even as you're coming into inquiry, to be like, is this really the question? Am I too embarrassed to ask it? Is this something I'm supposed to know? No. Like, you don't, like, just approach it like you don't know anything. So there's this quality, and the way that you can see it And there is some ways you can see sort of like this sort of like the energetic sort of like quotient of it is seeing other people do it and be like, why is that so like, why does that like feel just so aggravating? Like that, so and so said this in this book and this, and I was wondering what you think about, this kind of, it's just, and it's like, that's not a question. That's an exposition. Like you're trying to, and you're watching it and you're going, ah, fuck, you're just trying to show me how much you know. It's not a question. It's how much you know. It's trying to be seen as smart. You're smart. You're smart. And you get smarter by losing the desire to be smart. You get smarter. You're going to be able to access more capacity by like reducing the hang up of trying to hold an appearance of something. Why is the sky blue? I don't know. Well, apparently Einstein, Einstein and Da Vinci didn't have Google. Did they know? Probably, I don't know. But probably not. Like, I don't know. But the fact is, like, just the fact that it's like, listen, these minds could ask just had no hang up about asking the questions that were their questions. You should do the same. This is how you can replicate genius and access your own. The ability to use the states of our brain to take advantage of our full potential can involve tackling analytical problems at the beginning of the day when you're most awake and taking on problems that require insight and creative thinking later in the day when we may be a little sleepier and a bit more theta. Keep a bedside journal devoted to capturing ideas. Using a phone or other device will shift the brain out of theta and into a different state of wakefulness. Some of your ideas are good, perhaps even great. The notion that genius is IQ, logical problem solving, or only the capability of particular people is a modern construct. We're indoctrinated with belief in separatist individualism in modern Western culture. Ooh, well, there's that. Yeah, but our ancient predecessors, the Greeks and Romans, knew that creative genius was too much pressure for an individual. And in this context, creativity and genius are available for everyone, including you. Yeah, when there was, and it might have even been around the time I was writing this because the timing tracks, but when I was writing this book, I think one of the things, throughout my life, that like, and I imagine many of you can relate to this. There's always this sense that, it's like not living up to your potential, but it's like when you're still reconciling aspects of yourself that are related to safety and emotional regulation and sense of power and like belonging and fears and notions of abandonment and isolation. It's kind of like, who cares? Because like we need to ascend. We need to like the thing is that like in terms of self-actualization, even you look at like Maslow's hierarchy, which by the way is a Blackfoot Indian notion. He'd spent time with the Blackfoot Indians and came out and was like, guess what I came up with? This notion of like how you actually like self-actualize and then self-transcend. But anyway, I'll discuss that later. That is that it's like that's how this works. That ascension, like to be able to get into this thing where you're actually creating things and building things and doing all the stuff without the lower hubs, at least somewhat reconciled. It's just not, it's just almost ludicrous in the context of thinking about how this is actually structured in reality. So anyhow, I think it's time for me to go get something to eat. So yeah. Yeah. We're doing it. We are doing this. Yeah. We are about to hit curiosity and looking. And you know what the thing is? I think we're almost at the mark where it's actually a little bit heartbreaking. Oh my gosh, we have less than 100 pages left. We get to, yeah. Yeah, we passed that mark without me realizing it. It's like 310 actual pages. I used to think it was 336 for the longest time, and I'm not 100% sure how that happened. That's, I don't know. I think 310 is just right. Okay, I'm going to leave for now. Thank you so much. I absolutely love you and can't wait until next time. Bye for now.